Hello everyone, this is Prem Kumar. In this video, we will look into different configuration files that we use within the Pega Personal Edition infra setup. In the last video, we saw the steps that helps to download and install the Personal Edition. We also saw that to run any Pega application, you need two types of servers. One will be a web or an application server, the other will be the database server. So definitely for a Pega Personal Edition also, you will be needing the two servers here. So what will be the servers? If you take web server here, Pega do support a lot of web or application servers. It can be WebSphere, WebLogic, Tomcat, JBoss, etc. Similarly, on the database side, you can have Oracle, Postgres, MS SQL, etc. You can have different combinations also. Combinations here, what I meant is, you can have your application running on WebSphere. It can run either on Oracle, it can also run on MS SQL. All these documents Pega provide in their Pega community website. I will provide a link at the below of this video. You can also go through the link to visit different combinations of servers which you can use for Pega installation. Again, reiterating my point, these combinations will be based on the organization, the client organization, because they will already have a certain infrastructure which should be used because they might have license for those. So we may have to stick with the same infra. Okay, now coming back to the Pega Personal Edition. For the web server, we have Apache Tomcat, and for the database server, we have Postgres SQL. So why Pega chose both these options? It is because both are open source. In a software, you can have two types of software. It can be an open source software. It can be a licensed software. Open source is like a free software. You can just go to their official website and download the package. Whereas a licensed software is like you have to request them the software and you have to pay certain amounts to them before you can download the software from them. Since Pega Personal Edition is free, they are definitely using the open sourced softwares like Tomcat as well as the Postgres. In setting up Pega Personal Edition, you don't have to update any configuration files. But in real time, you may have to update the configuration files of these servers pointing to the organization server's host names or port name, etc. So in this video, I'm going to show you the important configuration files that are part of Tomcat as well as Postgres. Let's go to the tutorial. In the last lecture, we successfully installed the Pega Personal Edition. I installed it on the D drive. So let's start with the D drive. In the D drive, I see a folder PRPC Personal Edition. Inside the folder, I see all the artifacts or the subfolders that are related or used to run a Pega Personal Edition. There are two main folders, one on Tomcat, another on Postgres. Navigate into this Tomcat folder. There you see list of subfolders that supports the Tomcat web server. First is the bin folder. Bin stands for binaries. So inside the bin folder, you can find list of shell scripts that can be used to execute certain server operations. Batch file to shut down and also to start up the Pega Personal Edition. Next is configurations folder, which contain all the configuration files that are necessary to run a Tomcat web server. Do not worry about modifying this in your Personal Edition, because during the wizard, when you provide the right ports and all these configurations, Pega takes care of updating this. Only in situation when you want to modify certain ports or certain configurations, you will be updating these configuration files. In real time, definitely yes. In a real time project environment, you may have to update the files. But for now, let's keep it like this. We'll go through all these configuration files one by one. Kafka and Kafka data. So Pega Personal Edition ships with inbuilt Kafka that supports the streaming processes. There is an important concept called queue processor which uses the Kafka stream. But we have a dedicated lecture on this Kafka little later in this course. Next is the library folder where you contain all the libraries or jars. We do use Postgres, and definitely Postgres jar should be available for the Tomcat server, and it is available. Logs will contain the server logs. Temp contains some caches for the server. Web apps will contain all the web apps that are hosted under this Tomcat server. The two main apps are PR Web and PR Help. PR Web is where our Pega web application is hosted. And under work, you can navigate inside to find all the access logs or the localhost logs. So under PR web, you can see all the Pega related log files. So these are all the general folder structure of a Tomcat server. Now let's look at some basic configuration files. So under the conf folder, let's start with server.xml. You can use your own editor. I use Visual Studio Code. So under server.xml, you can configure all the server related configurations. All the port configurations you can mention here. For example, on the shutdown, we use 9005 and we also use 8080 port, and localhost we mentioned here. So all these server related configurations you can mention. And Pega by default, they provide some configurations and they would have commented out. If you want to use different SSL certificates on your personal edition, then you can enable these configurations. But you can always find these documents in the internet, because Apache Tomcat is like it is getting used by different applications or different languages. So it's just common for all the other applications as well, not only Pega. These things you can easily find it out online. One interesting thing is on resources. So here you see it uses a user database. All the user details are stored under another file, tomcat-users. First, let's launch the Tomcat server manager page. So to launch a Tomcat server, just log in, navigate to localhost :8080. That will give us a Tomcat page from which you can manage your Tomcat web server. You can check the server status. You can open the manager application as well. If you click the server status, it will prompt for your username and password. Your Apache Tomcat is currently secured. So to enable authentication to your Tomcat server, it will inbuilt use the Tomcat Users XML, which we saw under this conf folder. We have Tomcat Users. So if you open this one, by default, none of the user is enabled. Just again a security purpose. So this is the format which you need to mention. So you can enable the Tomcat users, and with this user you get a role to login. Again, I have a post on providing the users in my blog post. You can find it on my mynowpega.com. Okay, getting back, we saw server.xml and Tomcat users.xml. There are other two files, context and web. So there are four main configuration files on the server side: server.xml, Tomcat users.xml, web.xml, and context.xml. Now we have our own Pega web application hosted under Tomcat server. Let's look at the configuration files that are specific to Pega web application. Go into web apps, PR web, and then under web.inf, you will find web.xml. Okay, you also find two files. One file is on Tomcat server level, which is at a top level. Tomcat server can hold multiple web applications, and this web.xml is specific to our Pega application. Assume that there are 3 applications running on Tomcat, and if you want to apply configurations that are applicable to all the web applications, then you can apply it on the web.xml at the Tomcat server level. If it is application specific, then you can apply the configurations into web.xml of the application. So if you look at the web.xml of the application, generally the web.xml contains all the servlet mappings, like which servlet and which type of authentication it should use. So this can be customized per Pega application under this web.xml. Going back, we don't have context.xml, but context.xml is also same thing like web.xml. Let's look at the context.xml from the Tomcat server. Let's check out the contents. So context.xml, basically it can help to define the resources. So here you see we defined a resource of JDBC Pega rules as a common resource that can be used by all applications on this database server. So we defined a JDBC URL for this postgres. We know the port is 5432. Now again I will jump into the Pega applications other configuration files, web.inf. Under classes, you'll find one common file known by most of the developers. It's called pr-config file. So just open this file. So this contains all the configurations. But when you see now, most of the configurations have been commented out or it's removed from here and it's applied using DSS. Pega also provides an option not to update the configuration files in the pr-config, but to use DSS that can be applied system-wise. Let's say you are running 3 Pega servers and you want to apply the system configurations. pr-config file is applicable per each server. So instead of updating 3 pr-config files, you can create a DSS so that it will be applied to all the servers that are part of the Pega system. Don't confuse much. It's a bit advanced topic. We'll see it during the dynamic system settings lecture. So prconfig file can hold all the configurations that are part of Pega application. And you also have Pega log4j2, from where you can specify some appenders for your log files, how frequent it should append, and how the rolling random access file gets generated, whether based on certain size or based on day. You have to roll out to each log file. So you can look into this. Don't feel this is a big complex topic or something. Whenever you are learning something, just try to understand what is the underlying software is getting used. I can just straight away go ahead and talk about Pega application, the case type, and all those development work which you can do it in Pega application. But it's always nice to understand the basic, how Apache Tomcat is configured, how Pega is running inside a web server. So these are the necessary basic configuration files. Go ahead and just explore all these other folders or the configurations that are part of the Tomcat web server. So coming back to the installed personal edition directory, we have a Postgres SQL directory that contains all the source code or the binaries that is needed to run a Postgres database server. Navigate into the directory. So there you will find a lot of subdirectories. First thing is binaries or binary directory, which contains all the executables that can be executed in this server. So here the main thing is Postgres admin 4, from where we can launch the Postgres administrator web user interface. Let's go inside Postgres admin 4 and into the executables, so binaries, and there you will find an application pg admin 4. Just double click. That will open up a server or a web page from where you can see the servers. So currently I don't see any server. Maybe for the first time you may be asked to set a master password for it. If yes, then go ahead and set a master password. But for now, after setting the password, you see there are no servers added. You can right click and go ahead to create a new database server. Just use the server option. From here you can provide a name for your server. I've seen in the older versions, by default you get access to different database servers. The default database server that is part of Pega platform. For now I don't see it, but I can connect to the database server. Don't think that you are creating a brand new database server. It's just you are making a connection to an existing database server that is part of Pega platform. So in the connection, you have to give the host name. It's going to be my local host, and then port is 5432. Name, username is Postgres, database name is Postgres, and then password also here you can mention it as Postgres. Remember, in the context.xml file we mentioned the JDBC resource and we provided the URL, JDBC URL on the database Postgres with the username and password as Postgres. So you can use the same username and password and then click a save. So this should connect to your database. So if we expand the database, there you can see the database name Postgres, and under this database you can have different schemas. So by default there are two main schemas, that is rule schema and data schema, which gets loaded by the Pega installation. So rule schema is where you get all your Pega source code. It stays under different tables. So this is a big takeaway point, that Pega source code, all the jar files or all the classes gets persisted into the database, into any kind of database. It's not like you can be restricted only with Postgres. You can also use other database vendors like Oracle, MS SQL, etc. If you expand these tables, there you can see all the different tables that hold different types of source code. Pega source code can be categorized under different rule types, which we will look into detail in the coming lectures. For now, understand that the rule schema will hold all the source code of the Pega platform, and data schema will hold all the data related or supporting tables that can help with your application. You can also right click and use the query tool to execute any SQL queries against the database. So this is the web browser console of Postgres, but when you use other database clients like Oracle or MS SQL, you can have your own SQL developer client, and from there you can view the database tables and execute the queries. Okay, now we are a bit clear on the database part. So we get a database of name Postgres, and inside the Postgres we have two schemas: rule schema that holds the source code and data schema that can hold the application data. Hope you are now clear with the Postgres database configurations. In the next module, we will talk about different application studios.